I'm going to go to a slightly different topic real quick, just because it kind of goes with what I just said. I'm very, very curious to know your opinion on DAOs, only because I've been recently getting deep into DAOs because they seem so one. I'm not even gonna BS you, bro. Like these APYs are absurd, and I'm all for it. But I want to ask you, like, what as far as these DAOs, what are you looking? Let me make sure I have my words together. What are you seeing that are great positives and potential downsides to these?
Yeah, so I think a lot of them were kind of like crap in my opinion. That
Yes.
like you sort of see, and there's a huge mix of them too. There's some DAOs that are just as simple as like a Facebook group chat of people all over the world or whatever. And then there's some that are like super complicated that try to be these like fancy financial instruments that try to create these little communities. And I think what a DAO in the future, what the average DAO, and when I say average, I mean like 60 to 80% of the DAOs in the future will operate just like how a company operates now, but entirely decentralized. So whatever feature, whatever application, whatever function will operate on these decentralized networks. Instead of essentially having shareholders, you essentially have token holders that are able to get dividends, voting rights, governance rights, essentially a series of different features that are baked into the token that allow them to do X, Y, and Z, whether this is a charity, DAO for being able to choose what different causes get what money, or whether this is essentially almost like a company that maybe has certain features that allow you that has certain
Hmm.
features in the DApp itself, but then the token holders can have voters' rights to be able to update the token held in the main DApp to another DApp for update purposes, or maybe you want to change whatever it may be. I think it's going to be more focused on creating fully like actual decentralized autonomous organizations and not sort of like really digital communities. That's really what they are.
Hmm.
And the reason why I say that is I've seen people too sort of try to create DAOs where they try to create iOS apps. And then in the iOS app, you may have a profile, and that profile may have a smart contract with some governance tokens associated with it. And then each person's profile contract engage with each other user. I've seen stuff like that, and that can be an interesting DAO for different types of ecosystems. That's I've seen people try to do it for small scale things. Like I know someone trying to do it for uh, essentially creating ecosystem dApps for like homeless veterans and stuff like that, and being able to
Hmm.
commodify labor in different manners. And I've seen stuff like that looks really promising. But it's not so much of like you're going to do this and this and get this return. It's more of you're going to engage with this application in this way, and other people are going to engage in this application in this way, and you're going to end up having an output from the engagement, and then you're going to end up having an output from basically whatever people get out of it. So you see what I mean? So you'll end up having either profits from people just engaging with it, or you'll end up having people being profitable themselves, whether it's the person using the app being profitable, or whether it's just people that hold tokens in the app being profitable. And then it'll be whatever the function is, whether it's an app or whether it's a game or whether it's a whatever. You see what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of, and that's real interesting because I'm personally just trying to wrap my head around all the new things that are coming out in this space. So thank you for that explanation. But to bring it back to kind of what we were discussing a little earlier, uh, Quincy, I'm not gonna lie to you. The one thing that I love about you, you just a straight shooter, bro. You really just let people know what you think, and people may think like you're hyping it, but like you truly are in the front lines developing the underlying tech that is going to be used in the future. So when one day you said, "Hey, this XRP things could take off overnight," I'm like, "Oh well, Quincy Jones has the answers. Let's go to." So can we touch on this uh, just for a second when it comes to our baby XRP very quickly? Because one thing I'll say is that a lot of people and chart analysts who I respect a lot, they're calling for prices around the $10 to $13 range, and that's great, and I have targets there, and that's fine. But I'm not here for the $10 XRP. I'm here for the generational wealth XRP, and that means much higher values. What I'm curious to know is, with you seeing all this nonsense going on with the SEC lawsuit, clearly suppressing this asset, and us probably getting out with a favorable outcome based on the facts. What do you think this thing could reach? Like once things get going? I mean, I know we still have ways to go when it comes to building out some of these corridors and ecosystems and things like that. But what do you think we could get if the perfect storm hits?
Okay. Actually, this is perfect because this goes sort of back to market cap. So everything comes down to the minimum amount of liquidity needed to do basic operations in the capacity that we want to see them in terms of adoption. And that comes down to, what does that mean? Well, right now, I'm pretty sure the XRP market cap is what, like 80 billion or something.
I
Like
think
it's
it's
not, it's nothing.
50-ish. I think 50, maybe a little more,
50.
but I think.
Yeah, it's next to nothing. And what one thing you really need to look at is, what is 80 billion or what is 50 billion in terms of global wealth? Like it's nothing. Like they could print, 4 trillion tomorrow, and that would be nothing in terms of liquidity. So one thing you need to really look at is, what's the minimum liquidity needed to operate things functionally. And that's the thing, there's sort of a Metcalfe's law in here.
Yeah,
Metcalfe's law is, the more people that engage onto a network, the more value that's onto that network. So there's sort of a minimum. That's thing. That's where you end up getting the parabolic, like the mega parabolic moves, is where you get, once that minimum threshold is crossed, then what ends up happening is the snowball effect is people start going, well, everybody else is operating on its a minimum capacity. In order for me to be either competitive or compatible, I need to be able to operate in that too. And that's like, I don't think anyone's there yet. But see, here's the thing: in terms of liquidity, everyone needs to be able to get there in terms of liquidity, and their functionality needs to be able to get there to match that. And I think what ends up being really interesting is, well, I think XRP and a handful of other networks may have the only capabilities to be able to handle the liquidity and the performance needed for that. But that's the thing, like in terms of the minimum liquidity needed, it's like I can just throw out like 20 trillion maybe. But even then, like what is $20 trillion in the landscape of global wealth? And that's saying that $20 trillion isn't just $20 trillion that you can just liquidate instantaneously. That's just the minimum amount of liquidity that can essentially transgress through the network at any given time based off of the underlying volume of the assets in that network.
yeah,
So it could be 100 trillion, 200 trillion. Like, I'm not just saying this. You can sit there and go, oh, you're just saying this is for any of the winners that you claim that you want to win, for any token that you want.
yeah,
There needs to be a minimum amount of liquidity globally in order for these things to even get started. So yeah,
yes,
like I would say at least 50 to 100 trillion just to get started in terms of minimum amount of liquidity needed on a global scale. That's the thing. People like to think almost like just in terms of the United States on a global scale. So 100 trillion in terms on a global scale is literally just a trillion. A trillion between the top 100 countries, and let's say the top 20 countries have multiple trillions each. You see what I mean? So even then, that's not even a shit ton.
yeah, and
So
that's
I
what
think I
people.
think I think you have to look at it in terms of minimum effing. It's not just for XRP, although you want to look in terms of XRP. It's in terms of any network. So if you're saying Bitcoin, okay, fine. You have to say there needs to be this much minimum liquidity in order for people to use. And I'm saying it's more than just liquidity, because it's also performance, features, interoperability. There's so many different things that go into it too. There's a lot of things to think about. But liquidity is the number one thing in terms of like global adoption. It's sort of like it's the functional tool that's needed economically for the global adoption that everyone wants to take place. And it also comes down to why you're not going to see 100 different blockchain networks all be huge, because there's not enough value and wealth in the world to create enough liquidity for every network to win. You see what I mean?
Yes, I do understand that, and that's why I'm personally a utility maximalist, because I know that specifically they're choosing their winners now. They're choosing the ones that are going to be here in the futures now, and the writing is on the wall, kind of for quite a few of them. And I know you're personally fond of quite a few projects. I think you're very big on the ISO coins, correct?
Yeah.
Is there a specific reason why? I know there is, but I want you to go a little bit deeper for that.
Yeah, it actually it kind of starts off with me. So back when I worked at a private equity firm, I'll actually just go into like it's a little story for why that is. But back when I worked at the private equity firm, we were working on a few projects, primarily in cloud. And then I tried to get them sort of in the blockchain a little bit, explaining like Ethereum, explaining XRP. And they're like, oh, cool. Like it took me a couple months, maybe like 4 or 5 months, but I finally got them on board. And XRP was going to be the main thing I wanted to get them into. But at that time, the lawsuit was coming out, and they were like, "Ooh, this is yeah, we don't want to take the liability." And the biggest thing I was like, well, crap, like, what am I going to be able to do? So I was thinking in terms of like corporate entity ish, where I'm like, okay, what is a token, or what are tokens that they're going to be willing to accept that are going to be
Mhm.
within the confines of whatever that they're going to be willing to accept. And when I
Mhm.
told to them about XRP, I told them that it was ISO compliant. They already knew what ISO was. You gotta remember this is a financial firm. They already knew what it was. So it was very easy for me to stick to them and say, okay, this is something you guys already work with. This is something that these are compatible with. These like and that's the thing I had to also bring up. Like this is why I went into Corda and XDC and Algorand was because it was something that they already worked with that I knew. And this wasn't even just the only thing too, because that was the one reason why they didn't want to touch Ethereum or Bitcoin, because they knew that it wasn't within any compliance of anything that they already worked with. So it'd kind of just be them kind of just shooting their shot and hoping on making more or accumulating more of those assets, when in reality, they're mostly focused on just trying to build out their business to be more efficient. So they're
Mhm.
not really focused on hosting an asset. They just want to make their business more efficient. They're fine to move within assets to do that. But so yeah, I'm like trying to explain to them, like, look, these are also compliant. I explain what I like. They already knew what it is, but I'm like explaining like how these operate on these networks and how these are only one of a few. Like these aren't common on these networks. And one thing that I really noticed were like just from my experience and sort of the private life was they didn't really want to touch anything that wasn't anywhere near anything that can possibly be questioned as out of compliant with something that they're already doing. They're not going to get anywhere near the 10-foot pole. So if it's something that's already within the realm of something that they're already doing, and maybe there are some, like I said, they didn't want to deal with XRP because of the lawsuit, but they're perfectly fine with dealing with XDC and Corda and even Algorand. You see what I mean? So it's very easy to get them on board. And that's the thing. I see this already with a bunch of other companies I see on a day-to-day basis now, is that they want things to be as close to what they're already doing as possible,
Mhm.
with it at the same time being better. So them just moving entirely from their art. That's part of the reason why I chose Porta too, because I was already able to operate within the framework of their current system and move them over onto permission blockchain systems while without them changing too much of what they already had. Because it's a lot for them to just rip out everything they already had and then jump into Web3, Ethereum, and then now everything that they've had before is pretty much worthless, and they don't have any developers on this new stuff. So there needs
Yeah.
to be a little bit of a mesh between. So that was the main reason why I went into ISO so much, was because there was just such a strong pull at the job I worked at before to get into something that was that already had similar compliances to what they were already dealing with, and they were already familiar with it and
Mhm.
all the different standards for that. And
Mhm.
even now, when I just see more of it, I'm just like, it seems as if, uh, for one, compliance is going to be a huge thing anyway, and there really isn't anything clear on compliance. And
Yes.
ISO is kind of the only, and it's not perfectly clear, but it's essentially a series of guidelines that banks globally use to be able to send receipts to each other. And
Mhm.
it's very simple. Like it's not like a huge thing. That's why I'm like, wow, like if you're not even on this, and this is super simple and it's compliant with thousands of banks globally, then how are we supposed to get that adoption in which you're able to see that flow of different entities operating on that network if they can't even be adopted, if they can't already be compliant in the needs that they already are? You see what I mean?
Yes. That makes a lot
It's
of
like they've got
sense.
to fix problems they never had before. It's like we're not. It's like we're compliant now. You can move over to this network that's not compliant, and then we need to fix that. When in their mind, they're like, "Why would I do that if it already works now? Why would I make it harder for myself?" To you see what I
Yes.
mean?
That's what's most important. It's the literal adoption of these assets and compliance, compliance, compliance. It's some things that in crypto, it sounds taboo, but that's the reason why we're in the front lines of this specific niche within crypto. We're looking at these utility coins. Other people are looking for slow transaction speeds and high gas fees. That's that's what I see on the other side of things, and
It's super
and
weird. Like,
it's
and this
weird,
thing
bro.
too. Like, imagine telling somebody that's like super into Ethereum or something exactly what I told you about like, all the different transactions that can happen with data and commodified data, and just like it just could not handle something like that. Just like the scalability needed, and that's thing people don't think about it like at all, like zero zip. And it's
Mhm.
like you don't have to be like a hardcore developer to see that like A is better than B because A is faster, it jumps higher, it just does what
It's
they both do but better. But
it's
it's so weird.
it's silly, right? This is the only space on the planet where worse customer service and customer experience is seen as a good thing. I don't. It doesn't make sense to me either. But what I was asked is, do you think that ETH 2.0 really will solve a lot of these problems? Because I'm personally bullish on ETH 2.0, and I hope it does well. Because I hope Ether surpasses Bitcoin. Because I'm tired of Bitcoin and the old godfather controlling all these price swings. At least if we have the smart contract platform over here, at least maybe we can see some other things really move and decouple from it, you know?
Yeah, so there's one like it's kind of funny that people like I think there's one glaringly huge problem with ETH 2.0 that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
And it's that ETH 2.0 needs to be competitive. And right now it's not out yet. So right now it's basically sitting on the sidelines while all the other technologies are racing as fast as they can to be as innovative, as interoperable, and as competitive as possible. And it's
Mhm.
sort of like can you imagine rooting for like a football player that was spending half the season on the sidelines waiting for something to get done? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like no, you'd be going like, no, that guy's on the bench. I'm gonna be going into, who else is gonna be who else is going to be surpassing, other players in the league. And that's sort of what Ethereum's in right now. So Ethereum 2.0 is basically betting that Ethereum will be the most competitive smart contract platform out there when it's out. But it's barely the most competitive. Like it's not even really its most competitive in terms of liquidity, but it's barely even competitive in terms of what it's able to do now. Never
Mhm.
mind what it's going to be able to do then in terms of what the current technologies are doing now and what they'll be able to do then. You see what I mean? Like
Yes.
like not to really toot my own horn, but everything that we're doing with XDC is already faster, more performance driven. Oh yeah, it's already better than what you can see on Ethereum. But like people don't think in terms of like what you're going to do with it. They seem to be focused on more of the price, but at the same time, like how are you going to get the adoption if what you're going to do with it isn't comparable to other competitive technologies? You see what I mean? And that's the thing too. That's why I made a video earlier talking about sort of retail mindset and adopter mindset. And
Mhm.
adopters like do not give a flying F about these coins. They're just like, if I make $10 today, how do I make $11 tomorrow and $12 a day after that? You see what I mean? And that's the
And
thing. They just want to do what they know doing. They can just do it better, more efficient, cheaper, whatever. That's all. And that's the thing. You need to be competitive to do that. This is all competitive space to do that. You can't just be like, yeah, I know there are other faster platforms out there, cheaper platforms out there, platforms that have like other, better features out there. But then just stick with this one for like sentimental reasons.
Mhm. And it's very silly as well because it's one of those things where, like we said earlier, only in this space do you ride a broken down horse that's sitting on injury reserve because of tribalism. It's silly, and that's not how we make money. That the ROI is not there, and I see a very ominous game being played. I don't know if you saw yesterday, but Crypto Eddie posted how eToro has recently delisted Cardano and Tron. So what it seems like to me is that Ethereum is unleashing, and this is just my personal speculation, but I think Ether, their connections to regulators and politicians and things like that, they're deploying these and trying to stifle the competitors through potential legal hurdles and things like that. We see XRP going through this SEC lawsuit. We know that Ether's not the biggest fan of Ripple. You know that Mike Novogratz always bashes Ripple, and he was a former roommate of Joe Lubin, believe it or not. So it's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. I'm like, okay, Ether's just stifling innovation and trying to make damn sure that while they stand on the sidelines and build whatever nonsense they're building, other things can't compete. Right? That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of funny games being played because there's like, so you sort of already see this in finance. Not that they don't do this in finance. I guess it's a little bit more graceful and elegant in the finance space where it's like, it's like a subtle fuck you in your business. But in crypto, there's no rules, so there's really no rules. So yeah, there definitely seems to be a lot of anti-competitive behavior going on. But like I said, that's not new. I think the thing that's mostly new is that there's really no rules, and this goes in both ways. People trying to stifle other people scamming and creating ridiculous projects, and just things all over the place. And one thing I think is that people that if you see all this and you're sort of getting like upset and you're like, oh, this is crap. One thing to really think about, and this is the way I think about it too, especially from a developer standpoint,
Hmm.
is at the end of the day, like someone's not going to just choose this because like they're not going to just choose a technology just because it's popular, just because there's going to be a specific reasons why they use it, whether it's performance reasons, whether it's feature rich reasons, whether it's even like liquidity reasons, whatever, interoperability reasons. There are going to be fundamental like reasons why things are going to be built. And let's just take aside crypto for a second, because even in the cloud development space, I've literally worked at different jobs where I've sat there, explained like multiple technologies to them. One where I clearly see this one would be better for them, and they choose the other one. Where I'm like, look, like if that's something you want to use just because it has that in particular feature that you like that the other one doesn't, then that's why you're going to use it. Like you see what I mean? Like there are very particular reasons why. So it's like if they chose that one because they thought this one had the feature that the other one didn't have, that's why they're going to move over to these. And it's the same thing when it comes to crypto. So it's not that they're just going to go, oh, Ethereum's the biggest one. That's just it is. They may end up choosing Polkadot or XTC or Cardano or Algorand or any number one for whatever their specific needs may be.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's yeah, and that's the thing. There's nothing anyone can do about that. Like it's entirely decentralized. It's open. Anybody can start any project on any of these networks. So like you'll see a lot of anti-competitive behavior, but at the end of the day, the best technologies will prevail because it's that easy. Like, why would I go on this tech if this tech is better and I can do what I'm doing already better over here? And you see this too. You see a lot of technologies jump chains and readjust their technology because of exactly that. But but yeah, it's something where the best technologies are going to prevail because there's no reason for them not to. Like, why would I take an inferior technology for my use case if there's something out there that's just as accessible and just as, you see what I mean, and just as presumably more useful if you're using it. But
Everything you say is logic, reason, and it makes sense. Unfortunately, crypto's an irrational market right now. So until further notice, logic and reason will not prevail, and it is what it is. But that's exactly what I try my best to invest in networks with high speeds, low fees, and that are connected to these enterprises and high level institutions. And one thing I'll say is just kind of a bit of a prediction is that I think people are waiting for ETH 2.0 to come out to see if it can fix this gas fee problem. And if they don't, I think they're going to jump off like flies eventually, if they can, So that's something that I'm personally looking out for.